Hello there, welcome to Planet America's Weekend Edition. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Licciardello.
This week, the shutdown is over, Congress is back, and Jeffrey Epstein is back in the news with a bunch of emails that might be making the President of the United States a little bit nervous.
Also this week, I'm going to be talking to one of the Inspectors General controversially sacked by Trump. What does it mean for government accountability? But first,
the longest government shutdown in US history is finally at an end after 43 days.
Today we're sending a clear message that we will never give in to extortion, because that's what it was. They tried to extort, the Democrats tried to extort our country.
Polls consistently showed more voters blamed Trump and the Republicans for the shutdown than they did the Democrats in Congress. But House Speaker Mike Johnson is still trying to change that perception.
Senate Democrats have voted 14 times to close the government. Republicans voted a collective 15 times to open the government for the people, and the Democrats voted that many times to close it. And then they admitted, many of them, and we could name them here, but I'm not going to take the time, they admitted that they were using the American people as leverage in this political game. They knew that it would cause pain, and they did it anyway.
You'll recall this shutdown began at the beginning of October when Senate Democrats refused to allow a vote on a continuing resolution to keep funding the government because that resolution did not contain an extension of government subsidies for healthcare, meaning that many Americans are facing massive spikes in their healthcare premiums. Republicans had the option of abolishing the filibuster, allowing them to pass their budget with just 51 votes rather than 60, but they resisted that despite pressure from President Trump to take the so-called nuclear option. Independent Senator for Maine Angus King, who caucuses with the Democrats, explained their reason for ending the shutdown this week.
The question was, does the shutdown further the goal of achieving some needed support for the extension of the tax credits? Our judgment was that it would not produce that result. And the evidence for that is almost 7 weeks of fruitless attempts to make that happen.
King's fellow defector New Hampshire Democrat Jeanne Shaheen says that getting a Senate vote on extending the healthcare subsidies was as good a deal as they were going to get because at the end of the day, Republicans still hold all the levers of power.
Republicans control the White House, the Senate, and the House. And they made clear over a period of weeks, including just this week, that this was as far as they would go as part of the shutdown talks.
So in return for ending this shutdown, they have a promise from Republican Senate Majority Leader John Thune to hold a vote, which may or may not pass. But if it does, it will then have to go to the House of Representatives. And the big question then is whether Speaker Mike Johnson will allow that to go to a vote.
Mr. Speaker, can you guarantee whatever, if a bill passes the Senate on ACA, you'll give it a vote in the House?
Look, we're going to do in the House what we always do, and that is a deliberative process. I mean, we have to find consensus on whatever the proposal is. As you know, I do not guarantee the outcome of legislation or dates or deadlines or anything.
So, literally no guarantee. But King, Shaheen and the other defectors knew that. The question now is whether Republicans want to own the increase in healthcare costs heading into what is a midterm election year in 2026. President Trump clearly wants to see the system set up under the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, scrapped altogether.
I am recommending to Senate Republicans that the hundreds of billions of dollars currently being sent to money-sucking insurance companies in order to save the bad health care provided by Obamacare be sent directly to the people so that they can purchase their own much better health care and have money left over.
It is a complicated system, but in a nutshell, President Trump wants to see the end of the marketplaces where insurers can spread the risk, instead favouring an everyone-for-themselves approach, which might be great if you're young and healthy and never need to claim on your health insurance, but it's pretty terrible if you are elderly or have a pre-existing condition or develop a health issue where you could be denied insurance or forced to pay huge premiums and co-pays. In Trump's view, Democrats have been fleecing consumers to corruptly help their mates in the health insurance industry and even line their own pockets. Just this week, President Trump reposted this graphic on Truth Social, which says, breaking, Doge halts yearly payment of $2.5 million to Barack Obama for royalties linked to Obamacare. Obama has collected this payment since 2010 for a total of $40 million in taxpayer dollars. And then Trump added the single word,
Wow.
oh, wow, indeed. Obama himself has been paid $40 million in royalties for Obamacare. Huge if true. Turns out, not even slightly true. This is a lie that has been bouncing around on social media for years. The fact checkers at PolitiFact say it actually originated from satire. It is completely baseless, giving it their worst possible pants on fire rating. The President of the United States spreading such obvious misinformation should be in itself a scandal. But, well, it's just another day in the Trump era, Chaz.
Yes, indeed, John. Now, let me just say on Trump's idea about the new healthcare system where you basically do exactly what Obamacare does.
Go and get yourself a better deal.
But just you do it as an individual. And you don't have marketplaces with rules. I'll tell you what will happen then.
Yeah.
What will happen is you'll have people try and buy insurance as individuals and they won't get as good a deal as they would if they were being negotiated by bureaucrats or by middlemen or by experienced larger groups or employers. But also at the same time, they'll start getting ripped off. If there are no rules, there's no marketplace with no rules, that means they'll start to be sold junk insurance.
Right.
Insurance that doesn't really cover you.
The kinds of policies that were made illegal by the Affordable Care Act.
Exactly. We just go back to where we were before. And I promise you, people didn't like their healthcare before Obamacare at all.
50 million uninsured Americans.
Yeah, so I'm not sure that's going to be working. But let me ask you, how much did the Democrats stuff this up? I remember on Monday, you and I were looking at each other going, what just happened? Well, we've had 4 days now to work out what just happened.
Yeah.
Do you think that they've played their cards right, or do you think that they just chickened out?
Well, it could have been a case of take your money and run. They had a great election week last week. They were staring down the barrel of the Federal Aviation Administration reducing flights by 10% this week, heading towards Thanksgiving. That was going to suddenly make this shutdown a lot less popular. Democrats had succeeded in making this about affordability around healthcare, but all of a sudden it was going to look like you've ruined, Meemaw's last Thanksgiving. This is terrible. You can't do this. So, look, maybe it was quit while you're ahead. And it certainly seems that some Democrats were quite happy to have a little bit of an off-ramp. Other Democrats, particularly the left of the party, very unhappy. It's like, well, hang on. We were fighting for this thing. We shut down the government and now we didn't get this thing, but you're reopening government. What was it even for?
I sort of see the logic of where the negotiators are coming from, in that I do agree that to have this fight again, like in December and January, number one, what that does is that gets SNAP off the table, so that people aren't starving to death, which is a nice thing. It gets Thanksgiving off the table as well, so if they want to play games with air traffic, it's not going to be such a disaster. So it deprives Trump of hostages.
Yes.
Also, on top of that, after they have voted down these Obamacare subsidies, because right now they haven't voted them down yet, after they vote them down December, and we all know exactly how much we're paying for health insurance in January, the Democrats can go, well, have a look at this. This is what you're paying, and this is what the Republicans did. So they can probably fight more effectively then. I can see that logic. Yeah. But what I would say is I don't think they planned it very well the way they did this. They leaked it out. It was just a mess. You had like a herd of cats just flying in all kinds of directions, just whispering stuff. They should have just held one press conference very early on saying we are going to be negotiating because we don't think that we're going to get we think that Trump would prefer to let people starve than to allow people to get cheap health care.
Well, Trump was literally defying lower court orders going to the Supreme Court to give him the right to withhold $5 billion worth of emergency SNAP funding. That Trump was prepared to do that. That is the equivalent of shooting the hostage, in which case you say, OK, let him go.
But what I'm saying is that if they just took control of the announcement a bit more, it would have seemed less weak. I think it seemed weak because they didn't control the way the message came out at all. It was terrible messaging, I think. And I think that's part of what... I think they also took that took the left by surprise. I don't think that they enjoyed that much. I think if there was more control over it, there would be a different reaction. Because I don't think it's a stupid move they've made.
No.
I just think that they did it in a not intelligent way.
Yeah, well, as Angus King said, it had to end sometime and we weren't making any progress on the healthcare thing. And so we've made our point and we live to fight another day.
Trump definitely wasn't going to give in. That much I think is pretty clear.
That is true. But to quote the sage Chaz Licciardello from back in early October, you did make the point that of all the shutdowns, the minority party that shuts down the government does not get what they want. No. It doesn't work. Historically, it doesn't work. So the question is, did they just raise the issue enough to score political points and help out to win the House next year?
Look, they got as much out of it as you possibly could.
Yeah.
And coming back in 2 months, they got even more. They're going to get even more out of it. The
Yeah.
closer it gets to the election, the more salient that issue is going to be. So
Yeah.
it is. Look, there is a lot of logic to this.
Yeah.
They just got to play their cards right.
And they're now on to, of course, another potentially winning issue for them, because with the House of Representatives back for the first time since mid-September, Arizona Democrat Adelita Grijalva was finally sworn in this week following her special election win 8 weeks ago. Speaker Mike Johnson has been pretty happy to delay seating Grijalva because she'd already indicated that once sworn in, she would become the deciding 218th vote on a discharge petition to force the release of all government files on the late sex trafficker and child abuser Jeffrey Epstein.
Our democracy only works when everyone has a voice. This includes the millions of people across the country who have experienced violence and exploitation, including Liz Stein and Jessica Michaels, both survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse.
It was earlier on that same day that House Democrats and then Republicans released a whole bunch of emails, in total about 20,000 pages worth, that were originally provided by Jeffrey Epstein's lawyers.
Just this morning, House Democrats released more emails showing that Trump knew more about Epstein's abuses than he previously acknowledged. It's past time for Congress to restore its role as a check and balance on this administration and fight for we, the American people.
Well, Speaker Johnson then confirmed that with that petition successful, there will now be a House vote on releasing the Epstein files next week. Meanwhile, reporters have been working their way through those 20,000 pages of emails, mostly typing Control F Trump. And according to the New York Times, in them, all sorts of interesting nuggets. Mr. Epstein insulting Mr. Trump and hinting that he had damaging information on him. And some suggested that Mr. Epstein thought that Mr. Trump knew more about his, Epstein's, personal conduct than President Trump has previously publicly acknowledged. The emails also show that more than a decade after Trump allegedly broke off his friendship with Epstein because the financier, he says, had poached an employee, Virginia Giuffre, from his Mar-a-Lago club spa, Epstein attempted to pass a message to Russia's top diplomat, this is Sergei Lavrov. If you want to understand Trump, he said, talk to me. That was just before Trump's 2018 meeting with Putin in Helsinki, where he publicly and rather shockingly sided with the Russians over America's intelligence community, saying he accepted Putin's denial that he had not interfered in the 2016 election. Also among the emails, one from another high-profile Epstein associate, friend of the show and former Clinton Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers, who emailed after witnessing Trump with Putin to Epstein. Do the Russians have stuff on Trump today? Was appalling even by his standards. Epstein replied, my email is full with similar comments. Wow! Before continuing, admittedly, he has no idea of the symbolism. He has no idea of most things. There are lots of hints in these emails that Epstein felt that he knew incriminating things about Donald Trump. An email that Epstein sent to Ghislaine Maxwell in 2011, for example, called Trump the dog that hasn't barked. But so far, nothing quite like a smoking gun, Chaz.
No, but they can certainly create a lot of smoke in the meantime without the gun. It's pretty clear, I think, that the Democrats have been holding back for the last few weeks so they can get full attention for the Epstein stuff, and this is now going to be the period of Epstein.
Yeah.
Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, certainly sent out the signal about 2 weeks ago now that this time was coming, when all of a sudden his rhetoric about Epstein ramped up considerably.
Well, the Trump administration and Mike Johnson are running a pedophile protection program. That's what they've been doing. And that's the reason why they refused to swear in Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva.
Wow. Well, Seth Moulton, who's also a House rep, heard him loud and clear, because then a few days later, he went on MSNBC in the morning, and it's almost like he was begging to be sued by Trump.
And just what you see time and again from this White House, you know, if you're a criminal, you're going to buy your way to freedom with Trump. If you are one of the people like him who took advantage of young girls with Jeffrey Epstein, then we're going to sort of make that go away. I mean, fundamentally, Speaker Johnson...
We don't have evidence that he took advantage of young girls with Jeffrey Epstein.
Right. Just common sense be damned.
I'm not saying common sense be damned. I'm saying facts. Let's look at the facts. Is he in the Epstein files?
He's obviously in the Epstein files, and the reason that fundamentally Speaker Johnson has us on vacation is because he does not want to seat the newly elected Democratic representative.
Right, but you said he
Arizona.
took advantage of young girls. You have absolutely no evidence of that.
I think it's pretty obvious that that's what's going on.
You think it's pretty obvious?
I do.
Okay, so it's pretty clear to me that Seth Moulton's just making stuff up.
Yeah.
Notably, Trump did not sue him. Trump just shut up. Trump wants this to go away. And the Democrats know Trump wants this to go away. So I reckon they're going to be turning up the volume more and more, and there'll be more Seth Moulton saying highly irresponsible things over the next few weeks. I think they're going for it. And if Trump thinks that he can bottle this up by talking about hoaxes and saying, whatever, it ain't going to work, because it's not just all the Democrats. They're being helped by the two loudest people in the House, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie, and you cannot shut them up. Scientifically impossible.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there are so many threads to this. This week, I think my takeaway is that there is nothing that directly implicates Donald Trump in any illegal activity himself with underage girls. The White House keeps repeating the comments from Virginia Giuffre that Trump, basically acted like a gentleman, never heard or saw anything about him. What this does do, though, is it makes Trump's denial that he knew that things were going on with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell less and less plausible. It doesn't change the timeline of when he broke off his friendship with Epstein, which was before Epstein was charged the first time with what became prostitution charges, watered down from child sex charges in 2005, 2006. But it does create a problem for Trump that he spent hours in Epstein's company, in his house, talking to young girls. No suggestion that there was anything other than conversations. But we have Virginia Giuffre's public comments that Trump did nothing as far as she knew. But there have been other legal cases where Epstein victims have made allegations against Trump. They never concluded in trial. So there is more to come out. The question is it the big lie that people like Seth Moulton are talking about, or is it smaller lies that undermines the president's credibility? Either way, he, Larry Summers, Woody Allen, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, they're all tarred with this brush now because of their inappropriate association with somebody who was a sex criminal. And in many cases, they continued to have associations when they knew that that was the case. But for more on all of this, it's such a big week on Capitol Hill. I spoke to one of the keenest observers of the goings-on in Congress, Leigh Caldwell, who these days is with the news website Puck. Leigh Caldwell, welcome back to Planet America. I'm wondering this week on Capitol Hill, how much anger are you detecting amongst Democrats over the way this shutdown ended, and how much, perhaps, quiet relief amongst Democrats are you also sensing?
Yeah, well, what ended up happening is it divided the party. The party was pretty united for the first 35, 39 days, really, of this government shutdown. And that was a big feat, especially if you pull back a little bit. The party had really been struggling after the 2024 elections. Of course, Donald Trump won. They were really deflated. defeated literally and emotionally. And so the fact that they were able to come together and agree that they were going to try to pressure Republicans in this way on an issue such as health care, which is important to Democrats and also an issue that Republicans tend to struggle with too, really was a boost for the party. But in the end, the pressure became too much for some Democrats. It's really uncomfortable when people aren't getting food assistance, when people can't afford to eat, when people's flights are delayed or canceled, when it becomes a major inconvenience. And there's some Democrats who have always believed that a government shutdown is not the way to fight for policy outcomes. And then ultimately, those Democrats couldn't hold on anymore, and they decided to work with Republicans and reopen the government, of course. And so it's become tense within the party, and now the party is trying to figure out how to move forward again.
Leigh, I know for Puck News this week you've been reporting on Chuck Schumer's role in all of this. As Senate leader, he voted against reopening the government, but did he give a quiet sort of acquiescence to the ending of the shutdown so that those Democrat and independent senators could break with the party?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. The far left of the party is really blaming Chuck Schumer for this. Of course, he's the leader of Senate Democrats. And they're saying that he either let the negotiations happen with a wink and a nod, or he has no control of his caucus. And that's why these 8 decided to defect, essentially. And the answer is somewhere in between. The one thing that Schumer does is he lets his members negotiate, talk to Republicans. He doesn't want to cut off any conversations, but he does want to be made aware of everything that's happening. And his thing is no surprises. I do not want to be surprised on what happens. And so he was very much in the loop. Those on the left and within the party, the liberal senators, think that he didn't do enough to try to stop this deal from happening in that moment. They think that he should have stood up and said, enough is enough, not right now. We're going to hold out a little bit longer. And so it's become a very complicated time for Chuck Schumer when he thought that he was past all the trauma and drama from earlier in the year when the left was really mad at him for a similar issue. He thought he'd worked out all the kinks, and essentially he hadn't, and no one's really happy right now.
At this stage, what would you say is likely? Are we going to see the House voting on a possible extension of healthcare subsidies after the Senate votes? Will it even get that far?
There is most likely to be a Senate vote in December. We expect that vote to fail. We expect there to be 2 votes, actually, a vote on a Republican plan on healthcare and a vote on a Democratic plan on healthcare. And you're probably going to need 60 votes for both. The rules haven't been set yet for it to pass. And the expectation is that neither one of them will pass. In the House, Speaker Johnson has given no guarantee that he is going to put up any sort of vote on health care. But there is a lot of pressure on Speaker Johnson right now, not only from the president, but also from members within his own party to address the health care issue. And that is because there's a lot of members who are up for re-election this coming year in 2026 that are vulnerable in districts that aren't real Republican districts, that are kind of Democratic districts or swing districts. And they know that if healthcare premiums have skyrocketed, that they are going to be blamed. They are the ones in power. And so you have this really weird dynamic of these members Republicans who want to address the issue immediately. You have Donald Trump, who is pushing Speaker Johnson to kind of blow up the healthcare system and create a new one, something that is extremely complicated, cannot be done in a couple months. It took Democrats essentially 2 decades to figure out healthcare when they did Obamacare in 2010-ish. So we'll see what Speaker Johnson does. There's a lot of dynamics here, but this is what I'm told going to be a huge topic of conversation among Republicans for the next few weeks at least.
Leanne, history of the last 10 or 15 years tells us that Republicans have tried and failed and tried and failed to repeal and replace Obamacare. If they are yet again unable to come up with an alternative that they can agree on and then pass, and healthcare premiums have gone up by January, could we see Democrats shut the government down, at least in part, all over again?
They do have the option of closing down the government again because that's when government funding runs out. They gave themselves an extension to fund the government until January 30th. I'm not sure if they're willing to shut down the government again. We're going to have to see what the political environment is. We're going to have to see what was done on healthcare, if anything. There's a lot of dynamics at play, and no one is making any sort of commitments just now. But how Republicans are feeling a lot of pressure to address the healthcare issue. Democrats, meanwhile, they feel like they're in a very good spot. They fought on the issue of healthcare. They even shut down the government over it. Republicans refused to address it. So as painful as it will be for millions of Americans with these extremely expensive healthcare costs, Democrats feel politically comfortable that they are doing everything they can, and that is a good place politically to be. So, you know, the dynamics and the political situation has almost switched in the sense that Democrats have fought and Republicans are now the ones who might have to act.
With the government reopened and the House of Representatives back in session this week, we had the final signature required for this discharge petition to force the Department of Justice to release any documents they have on Jeffrey Epstein, the so-called Epstein files. There is going to be a vote in the House next week. Does it then just become automatic that the Epstein files have to be released?
So no, it won't immediately release them. It will likely come up for a vote this coming week. Talking to my Republican sources today, they expect it to pass. It's going to be really difficult for Republicans to vote against this. And so what happens next is then it has to go to the Senate, and it's up to the Senate to take it up. The Senate will most likely need 60 votes for it to pass. And then if it does pass, then it goes to the president, and the president has to sign this. And that's a really interesting question to see what he does. And so regardless of the outcome of the files relating to Jeffrey Epstein, every step of the way, it is politically perilous for Republicans and for Donald Trump, depending on what they do. So this has become a huge political headache for the president, even though it's one of his own making, in the sense that this would probably not be an issue if it was not him and his own Justice Department who promised the release of all of these Epstein files and failed to do so. So, you know, this is an issue that they wish they didn't have to deal with, but it's something that is not yet going away.
And finally, Leanne, what did you make of those tens of thousands of pages of Epstein emails that were released by Congress this week? Was there anything in there that is causing real anxiety in the Trump White House, do you think?
Yeah, you know, anytime Trump's name is mentioned in these Epstein files, it's problematic for the administration. His name, and to be clear, these are files that have been released from the Epstein estate. So these are not the files from the Justice Department, which has a lot more than what the Epstein estate has. And the reason the Epstein estate files have been released is because they were subpoenaed by the House Oversight Committee, which is a committee in the House of an investigative committee in the House of Representatives. So this is just a fraction of what there is. And the fact that out of these 20,000 pages of emails that were released, that Trump was mentioned, and they show that he was much more connected to Epstein than Trump has previously admitted, and also shows how much of a grudge Epstein had against Donald Trump after Donald Trump did kick him out of Mar-a-Lago, his private club in Palm Beach, Florida. And so this could very well be the tip of the iceberg, or it could encapsulate the entirety of their relationship. We're not totally sure yet, but this is why so many people want these files to be released, John.
Leigh Caldwell, thanks for being with us on Planet America's Weekend Edition.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It was one of those presidential posts on social media that seemingly came out of nowhere. Headlined Great American Presidents with 30-year mortgage over a picture of Franklin Roosevelt and 50-year mortgage over a picture of Donald Trump. The reaction on Trump's own social media site from people who usually support the president was pretty immediate and overwhelmingly negative. For example, Momo64 wrote, 50 years? 30 years is bad enough. How about you make things more affordable? RatDog2020 replied, 50-year mortgage is nuts, especially when you look at the additional interest one would have to pay. Ken Rock put it even more succinctly. 50-year mortgage is absurd. And Jeannie had a theory. There's no way President Trump is for a 50-year mortgage. He probably wants to bring to the attention of the people just how bad even the 30-year mortgage is. And experts do point out that overall, 50-year mortgages would be much more expensive.
Take a $400,000 loan at 6% interest. Under a 30-year mortgage, the monthly payment would be just shy of $2,400. Under a 50-year loan, it drops to just over $2,100, a savings of nearly $300 a month. But over time, that savings is erased by a much larger interest bill, because while the total interest on a 30-year loan would be about $463,000, the interest on a 50-year loan would total more than $860,000.
Even MAGA Madge, Marjorie Taylor Greene, isn't on board with this idea. She believes in chemtrails, but not 50-year mortgages, because she says that people will pay far more in interest over time and die before they ever pay off their home, presumably from exposure to the chemtrails. So it is not a great reception this week, but a massive overhaul of the housing sector like this must have come after months of study and consultation with stakeholders and banks and housing experts and consumer groups. Turns out not so much. On Saturday night, Bill Pulte, Trump's Federal Housing Finance Agency chief, arrived at President Trump's Palm Beach Golf Club with that graphic of Roosevelt and Trump tucked under his arm. 10 minutes later, Trump posted that image on Truth Social. That's how long it took him. According to Politico, White House officials are furious with Pulte and were blindsided by this idea. This is quite clearly thought bubble policy making and perhaps an insight, Chaz, into how Trump's style of leadership has evolved in his second term. In his first term, he was surrounded by a lot of people who were trying to say, no, Mr. President, here's what, you can't do this. Now he's surrounded by people like Pulte who are pitching all sorts of ideas, half-baked ideas at that. We're soon going to find out whether there are any adults left in that blindsided White House.
He needs to listen to RatDog2020. That's what he needs to listen to. It's a terrible idea. And all his allies, his smart allies, are trying to convince him of this. In the middle of an interview, Laura Ingraham was just going, don't know about this. On air, she was trying to talk him out of it, but he didn't take the hint.
It's not even a big deal. I mean, you know, you go from 40 to 50 years, and what it means is you pay something less. From 30, that some people had a 40, and then now they have a 50. All it means is you pay less per month. You pay it over a longer period of time. It's not like a big factor. It might help a little bit. But the problem was that Biden did this. He increased the interest rates, and I have a lousy Fed person who's going to be gone in a few months.
No, this is a big factor. This is a problem. Just to be clear, there's a serious problem that needs to be solved here. Housing affordability is a huge issue in America at the moment. Things are getting so expensive in the housing that you need to be old to be able to afford it. This is a shocking graph I'll show you. This is the median age of all home buyers, all people buying homes. Have a look. In 1981, the median age, so the exact middle point of people who were buying homes was 31 years old.
Or their third home, or their fourth home, any home buyer.
Any home buyer, 31 years old, which means almost half the home buyers were in their 20s.
Sure.
Now, 56 last year, I can tell you this year it's even worse, it's 59. There are actually there's more home buyers who are 70 than who are 35. It's because young people simply cannot afford homes. So there's a serious problem here, but this is not the solution. As you said, not only are they going to pay twice as much interest, but on top of that, the way equity works when you're buying a home and you're paying off your mortgage, at the beginning you're just paying off interest. It takes ages to pay off the principal. So, for instance, if we go back to that $400,000 house that was mentioned in that news clip that you played before, with a $400,000 home and a 30-year mortgage, you're looking at 9 years to pay off the first $50,000 of your principal, of your loan. But if that was a 50-year loan, it would take 24 years to pay off the first $50,000 of your principal. So what that means is most of the people on 50-year loans haven't paid off very much of their loan at all. If there's a downturn in the housing market, they could easily end up underwater where they owe more money than the original loan value. And people could retire having not paid off a cent of the actual principal of their loan.
Right. But paying a mortgage for 30 years and not owning any equity in their house.
Exactly.
They need a 50-year mortgage at the age of 15 if they want to retire having paid off their house.
And by the way, the prices will go up even more because if there's more people in the market who can afford higher prices, the prices will go up even more. In Japan, they tried this in the 80s, and the bubble burst in 1990. There are still houses that are worth less than they were worth in 1990 today in Japan. So. Listen to Rat Dog 2020, John.
Yeah. He's got my vote.
Anyway, to a story that's received very little attention. A few weeks back, a woman named Parissa Salehi was the Inspector General for the Export-Import Bank of the United States. Now, Salehi was widely respected and there were no complaints about her. There's nothing wrong with her, but she was just suddenly sacked for some reason. And the only thing that had changed was that the bank just had a new president and chairman appointed. Same person, a man by the name of John Jovanovic. So why would the administration want to look after Jovanovic and get rid of his oversight? It turns out Mr. Jovanovic is the son-in-law of Dr. Mehmet Oz, administrator for Trump's Medicare and Medicaid services. Now, in the Trump administration, friends of Trump do not need to worry about watchdogs. At this point, Trump has fired or reassigned about 24 inspectors general, and if that's not enough, he's moved to defund their entire umbrella group, the Council of the Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency. Trump does not like oversight. He likes it so little that in his very first week of his second term, he immediately sacked 17 inspectors general, all for seemingly no reason other than a general dislike of oversight. In any other presidency, that might be an administration-defined scandal. In this administration, it was a Thursday. But so I thought I should check in on how things are going in Inspector General world today with one of those sacked IGs from earlier in the year, the former Inspector General for the Department of the Interior, Mark Greenblatt. I asked him if he was told why he was fired.
Well, the email that I received, it was on the first Friday, the fourth day of the second term of the Trump administration. And it was a 2-sentence email, and it said, your service as IG at the Department of the Interior is terminated effective immediately. And it was due to, quote, changing priorities. And then it said, thank you for your service. So that was it. That was the extent of it, Chaz.
Now, there are some roles where the president's expected to hire and fire at will, and there are others where the president's only supposed to fire people if he has a good reason to fire them. Which one of those is Inspector General?
So the IGs are supposed to be independent from the agency that they're looking into. And there are several ways that we build in that independence. They have their own budget, they have their own HR, they have their own legal counsel. And the other way that's very prominent is they have no term. So they are supposed to ride through administrations. For example, I was appointed under the Trump first administration. I was in office through the entire Biden administration, and then Trump, on his opening days of the second administration, then fired me. And so, the president has the authority to remove people in the executive branch. The question is, what's the scope of that authority? As you mentioned, there are some that have some protections. IGs, historically, the norm has been that they do not get removed at the beginning of an administration, and that they're really just removed for misconduct purposes. Like if there's some sort of substantiated report of misconduct about their actions or their failure of leadership. And none of that was true with me or with the others that were fired under this administration.
So it was what, 17 out of the 72 inspectors general who were sacked in week one of this administration. How many would you say have been fired in total this year for no apparent reason?
So, Chaz, there's a little bit of nuance here, and I think it's worth getting into. So forgive me, I'm going to do a little bit of inside baseball, but you'll see the point that I'm getting to. First of all, as you mentioned, there are 72 IGs in the federal government right now in all sorts of different agencies. Half of them are appointed by the agency heads, and half of them are appointed by the president. So it's about 36 or so that are presidential appointees, which means the president can remove them in one stroke of the pen. Of those 36 or so that the president could remove, there were about 10 that were vacant at the time of the inauguration. So when he walked into office, there were only about 25, 26 in office at the time. So of the ones he could remove, he removed 17 of us right out of the gate. And so 17 of the 25 say that was a huge, just a complete decapitation of the IG community. They were some of the biggest, most robust offices. They were, virtually all of the cabinet level agencies. So these are the bigger offices, the more powerful IGs, if you will. So it's not just, say, 17 of the 72. It's really 17 of the very, very, very top of that pyramid, if you will. So this was a very big deal. It was, as I said, just a decapitation of the Inspector General community.
So why do you think we've barely heard about this story in 6 months, Mark? There were court cases at the time about this, I believe, and the Democrats and the media, they're always looking for controversies to report on. Why has this ongoing issue disappeared?
So I think it's two things, Chad, and I think you've put your finger on a significant issue. One is that historically, the inspectors general have flown under the radar. Historically, they're sort of auditors, they're investigators that are behind the scenes. They don't want to attract attention. That was very much uncouth, frankly, in the IG community. So I think that's one big thing, is the low profile that we've had historically means that folks aren't aware of us and therefore aren't getting frustrated and mad when these removals happened. The other thing is, I think there's just a flooding of the zone. That's the term that we've been using here in the States, where there's just so much news. There's a daily outrage. And so there's something new, something different, be it by the Trump administration, by the Democrats, whoever it is. There's just a constant, steady drumbeat of shiny objects. And so the public attention is shifted to that. I think there was attention initially on the firings of the inspectors general, but in the months since then, there have just been too many shiny objects to focus the public attention on.
Okay, so let's explain why this matters then. There'll be people watching this interview, Mark, who are already glazing over, thinking, who cares? There are bigger concerns than this about the Trump administration. What would you say to them? Why is this so important?
So inspectors general are the primary accountability mechanism inside the federal government. We have investigators, we have auditors, inspectors that look at the programs and operations of every department in the federal government. And so the decapitation of the Inspector General community is effectively taking a cop off the beat. And that's the phrase we use here in the States. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but when there's a cop walking down the street, there's less crime that's going to happen on that street when the cop is visible, when the cop is active. And that's sort of what the inspectors general provide is we are a cop on the beat, a literally investigators with badges and guns and handcuffs, as well as auditors and inspectors that are on the beat looking over the shoulder of government officials, including the highest, most senior-most folks in their agencies, making sure there's no misconduct. And that preventative mechanism, it's not just detecting the fraud and misconduct, it's also preventing all of that. Well, if you remove the cop on the beat there, you're just allowing fraud, waste, and abuse to happen. And that's a big, big deal because it underpins every federal agency. So the whole trust mechanism in government gets removed. And that's something that, yes, with these daily outrages, it's very frustrating, but the IGs are the folks on the front lines who are trying to prevent and detect those types of abuses. And that's why this matters, is that it's the American taxpayers, the representatives inside the federal agencies. And when you remove that, it's the wild, wild west, as we say.
Mark, are the current IGs and temporary IGs meaningfully holding the Trump administration to account at the moment, or have they been defanged?
It's a mixed bag on that, Chaz, and that's there are some IGs who are doing some great work. The Department of Defense IG that I just mentioned, the acting IG, is doing a review right now of what's called Signalgate. This is where the Secretary of Defense and a number of other high-ranking administration officials used Signal to discuss imminent military strikes. And the DOD acting IG is looking into the propriety of that. And hopefully their report will be coming out soon. Whether they can issue that without getting fired, whether they can issue that without getting some sort of retaliation against them, be it a budget cut or what have you, that'll be a real test. There are some other IGs that are doing some good work, and that is very heartening. The question is, are there IGs that are not doing things, that are avoiding things because of the potential blowback, because of being fired, being removed, being demoted, having their budget slashed? Those are real questions that the American public should be asking right now. And that to me is the 5-alarm fire. We need their credibility, their integrity to be above reproach. Where there is no concern that an inspector general is worried about their job when they're doing a review. That should not be in their mind. And so that's the kind of thing that keeps me up at night, Chaz, and that's what I would be looking for in terms of the American public.
Mark Greenblatt, thanks for visiting Planet America.
Thank you so much. It's a real honor to be here.
And that is all for another weekend edition of Planet America. Our next program is on ABC TV on Monday night at 9:40 p.m. or any time thereafter on ABC iView, YouTube and Facebook.
And we're going to be back here on ABC News next Friday night. And do not forget the Planet Extra podcast, PEP, come out tomorrow in all the finest pod places.
Bye-bye.